Hi everyone, we're here with the 79th Airborne Brigade. They're defending Kurakhove. The situation is extremely difficult. We want to say a big thank you to Frit Ukraine, who helped them with 3 Mavic 3 drones. Please keep supporting these defenders. Please keep supporting volunteers, organizations, because the help is needed, and it's needed urgently.
Вот она, еще, по-моему, М113.
The armed forces of the Russian Federation completed 3 major operations at once in the south and center of the Donbas region. They are close to the encirclement of VELIKA, Novosilka, and Kurakhove. At the same time, Russian troops are preparing favorable initial conditions for the next battle. They cover Kurakhove from the south and the west to try to surround it in the future. In fact, some reports now suggest that the Russians have completed the capture of Kurakhove city. This, however, remains unconfirmed as of today. In the Kursk region, despite the unsubstantiated claim of the introduction of North Korean troops into battle, the Russian armed forces have not yet eliminated the bridgehead of the armed forces of Ukraine, which Kiev, according to Ukrainian media, now plans to use as a trade asset in negotiations. However, US officials are now reporting in Western media that this latter strategy may not work if Ukraine is unable to hold on to Kursk in time for the supposed negotiations. And in an alarming Bloomberg report, not more than a few days old, it was stated that, and I quote, Ukraine's military is already grappling with a lack of manpower and uncertainty about the future flow of supplies from the US and other allies, even as it struggles to fend off Russian advances in the east. And more importantly, that, and I quote again, with a more concerted effort by Moscow to push Ukrainian troops out of Kursk, possibly as soon as next month, Kiev's forces may only be able to hold the land until spring before they are forced to retreat or risk being encircled, the US official said, speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss their confidential assessments. But that is not all, my friends. AP News reported on the 28th of December that Ukrainian troops were, and I quote, bloodied and demoralized by the rising risk of facing defeat in Kursk, and that according to several frontline soldiers who they interviewed under the condition of anonymity, I quote again, battles are so intense that some Ukrainian commanders cannot evacuate the dead. Communication lags and poorly timed tactics have cost lives, and troops have little way to counterattack. So today is the Frontline report for this past Christmas week. I will start off with Kurakhove, where some reports suggest a major event happened in favor of the Russians. The next front will be the Kursk sector, where even the Western media is sounding the alarm of a coming collapse. I will finish off with Kurakhove and VELIKA Novosilka. But before we start, just briefly, I want to say that this year was a good year for the channel. I was recently monetized towards the end of September, and from September to now, the channel has grown from a mere 2,500 subscribers to close to 10,000 subscribers. I really intend to hit the 10,000 subscriber mark before the end of this year, so please tell all your friends and family to subscribe. Now going into 2025, I intend to get some better equipment such as lighting and of course a better microphone. So all that I ask is that you continue to support this channel by viewing my videos and engaging with all my content, including the community posts. And for those of you who can, super thanks donations, channel membership subscriptions, and purchases from the merch shop all greatly help and support me while I pour all of my efforts into my research for these videos. So thank you for all of your support. Happy New Year's to you and your family. And of course, let's get into it. The plan to capture Kurakhove assumed to surround the city with strikes in converging directions from the north, that is, the group that captured Selidove and Gornyak, and the south, by the troops that had previously occupied Ugledar. The two groups were to meet either near the western end of the Kurakhove reservoir or further west near the village of Constantinople. The encirclement has not yet been completed. The armed forces of Ukraine also still control the Donetsk-Zaporizhia road west of Kurakhove, which supplies the garrison in the industrial zone in the western part of the city, according to Medusa. As of this past week, the stormtroopers of the Russian army occupied the center of Kurakhove, the administration and the area of high-rise buildings, pushing the armed forces of Ukraine into the industrial zone in the west of the city. The defense of the industrial zone was considered to be no longer advisable. In fact, it was recommended by the Ukrainian command that an urgent defense line was needed on the Donetsk-Zaporizhia road west of the city if it wanted to prevent a new breakthrough of Russian troops. On the 27th of December, however, it appears that Ukraine's worst fears may have materialized. Newsweek newspaper, citing the infamous Institute for the Study of War, or the ISW, reported that Russian forces have taken control of the town of Kurakhove in the strategically important Donetsk region following a 2-month siege, according to local reports. Newsweek has contacted the Russian Ministry of Defense for confirmation on the advances via email for this story and are awaiting a response. But as with every major setback for Ukraine, the ISW continuously invents new ways to cope. And here's how they coped in the report from Newsweek. The taking of Kurakhove gives Russia a strong foothold in the region from which it can launch future operations. In quotations, the ISW predicts that Russian forces may face difficulty in further advances as Ukraine still maintains a strong presence in Kurakhove to the west of the town. So my friends, bookmark this ISW quote and let's see how things play out in the coming weeks. It is worth noting that as of the 29th of December, when this video was made, DeepState UA claims that fighting continues in the western and southern outskirts of Kurakhove, and thus the city has not yet fallen. No doubt this will be confirmed in short order, so stay tuned. However, on the southern sector of Kurakhove, the situation for the armed forces of Ukraine continues to deteriorate. After the Russian armed forces surrounded and captured Ukrainian strongholds on the Suky Yali River southeast of Kurakhove, they quickly advanced along the river west to Constantinople. There is now clearly a hole in the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine. Now Russian troops are 4 kilometers from Constantinople and the Donetsk-Zaporizhia road, and they do not need to overcome water obstacles for a further offensive. From the north, Russian troops reached the dam of the Kurakhove reservoir on the Vovcha River and moved further west towards the same Constantinople, where the Suky Yali flows into the Vovcha River. Russian aviation bombed bridges across Suky Yali and Vovcha in the vicinity of Constantinople, which makes it difficult for the armed forces of Ukraine to transfer reserves. And now let's move on to what is now the gloomiest part of the front for Ukraine, at least according to the Western media. Vladimir Putin ordered his command to oust the Ukrainian troops from the Kursk region, probably before the start of negotiations with Trump. This is now the prevailing narrative in Ukrainian and Western media. After the first successes of the Russian offensive in the fall, the armed forces of Ukraine have been able to hold off the Russian advances around Sudzha. The Russian plan involved strikes along the border from the west and east, which would force Ukrainian troops to retreat to the Sumy region under the threat of encirclement. But in the west, the offensive near the village of Novosilka, where the armed forces of Ukraine transferred large reserves. Attempts to reach the rear of the units of the armed forces of Ukraine in Novosilka by a strike from the north through Malaya Loknya in November were largely held off. Russian troops, despite many attempts, had not yet been able to reach Malaya Loknya. However, they have reached within 2 kilometers of the important village by capturing the village of Kuglenkoye last week. As of yesterday, however, it seems that they have inched even closer to Malaya Loknya. In the east, Russian units secured the village of Plehovo near the Sel River. But the narrative behind the Kursk invasion is changing rapidly in the Western and Ukrainian media reports, which suggests to me that whatever they initially hoped to achieve by what even President Putin calls a misadventure has failed, and thus the cover-up is now underway. For instance, it was reported here that according to some unnamed US official, Ukraine's intent in Kursk was never to keep Kursk, but rather, and I quote, for the shock value of its counter-invasion and to further reduce Russia's forces. So according to him, a retreat could still be portrayed as a tactical success. Two of the officials interviewed in this report from Bloomberg expressed hope that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will order a retreat from Kursk soon enough to avoid suffering high casualties. Then we have this report from the Washington Post as reported in AP News, who says that Ukraine's Army Chief Alexander Syrsky has said that Ukraine launched the operation because officials thought Russia was about to launch a new attack on northeast Ukraine. In fact, here is a full excerpt of what Ukraine's chief commander said. It began on August 5th with an order to leave Ukraine's Sumy region for what they thought would be a 9-day raid to stun the enemy. It became an occupation that Ukrainians welcomed as their smaller country gained the leverage and embarrassed Russian President Vladimir Putin. Gathering his men, one company commander told them, "We are making history. The whole world will know about us because this has not been done since World War II." Privately, however, he was less certain. "It seemed crazy," he said. "I didn't understand why." Shocked by the success achieved largely because the Russians were supposedly caught by surprise, the Ukrainians were ordered to advance beyond the original mission to the town of Kurakhove, 25 kilometers or 16 miles into Russia. That was one of the first places where Russian troops counterattacked, close quotations. But since Russia's recent counterattacks in November, the narrative has drastically changed. For instance, the company commander interviewed by AP says that half of his troops are either dead or wounded. Another commander said that some orders his men have received do not reflect reality because of delays in communication. Delays occur especially when territory is lost to Russian troops, he said. And the reports, my friends, only get worse from here. They don't understand where our side is, where the Russian enemy is, what is under our control and what isn't, he said. They don't understand the operational situation. We act at our own discretion. One platoon commander said higher-ups have repeatedly turned down his requests to change his unit's defensive position because he knows his men cannot hold the line. In quotations, those people who stand until the end are ending up missing in action, he said. He said he also knows of at least 20 Ukrainian soldiers whose bodies had been abandoned over the last 4 months because the battles were too intense to evacuate them without more casualties. But what perhaps is the most damning report for the Ukrainians in the Kursk region is this one that says they see no option of retreat. Listen to this excerpt. Ukrainian soldiers said they were not prepared for the aggressive Russian response in Kursk and cannot counterattack or pull back. In quotations, there is no other option. We will fight here because if we just pull back to our borders, they won't stop. They will keep advancing, said one drone unit commander. After the capture of the city of Selidove by Russian troops in the fall, a gap was formed between Pokrovsk and Kurakhove in the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine. The Russian command, judging by the further movements of the troops, had the idea to introduce large forces into this gap. In December, Russian troops broke through the defense of the armed forces of Ukraine 10 kilometers deep and reached the road Pokrovsk-Konstantinopolsky, VELIKA Novosilka, 5 kilometers south of Pokrovsk. There, a battle broke out for the village of Shevchenko with the Ukrainian forces from Pokrovsk. The village itself was captured by Russian troops, but armored groups of the armed forces of Ukraine repeatedly attacked their positions on the outskirts. Ukrainian reserves were also attacked in the direction of the village of Novosilka, occupied by the Russian army to the west of Shevchenko. However, these attacks were repelled, after which the Russian units advanced to the west. Obviously, the immediate assault of the large city of Pokrovsk is not part of the plans of the Russian command. The troops are moving further west to try to surround Pokrovsk in 2025. The Russian armed forces have only 5 kilometers to go to the village of Udachnoye, or Udachny, to the west of Pokrovsk, near which the largest coking coal mine in the country is located. but the Russian army is separated from Udachny by the Salt River, on which the armed forces of Ukraine can try to create a new defense line. In addition, Russian troops are advancing in the Salt Valley and east of Shevchenko in the direction of the southern outskirts of Kursk, and to the south to the village of Pushkino, where there seem to be very few Ukrainian troops. The armed forces of Ukraine, despite the transfer of reserves to Kursk, clearly do not have enough forces to parry all these threats, as reported by Ukrainian media. In VELIKA, Novosilka, the Russian army is tightening the ring around the district center of the city on the border of Donetsk and Zaporizhia regions. The idea of the operation was to press Ukrainian troops to the east bank of the Mori-Yali River in the district center itself. Most of it is located east of the Mori-Yali. To do this, it was necessary to cut the road leading north towards Pokrovsk. In addition, the encirclement and storming of the village was supposed to facilitate the exit of the Russian armed forces to the heights on the west bank of the river and attacks along the Wet Yali from the south. Not without problems, but Russian troops managed to solve the task. In early December, the Russian armed forces cut off the road leading north near the village of Novi Komar, which is vital for the armed forces of Ukraine, but the Ukrainian command sent reserves there and recaptured the road and the village. However, a few days ago, Russian units made another attempt to attack and again were able to cut off the road. At the same time, the Russian armed forces attacked in the south in the valley of the Mori-Yali. As a result, Ukrainian units defending the villages of Makarovka and Storezheve were surrounded. Most of those surrounded probably managed to get north. Pursuing them, Russian troops came close to the heights of Netskuchnoye and Vremevka, which tower over the entire river valley and VELIKA, Novosilka. Now the village is actually surrounded. The road to the north is cut off. Russian aviation is constantly bombing the crossings on the Wet Yali and does not allow the armed forces of Ukraine to supply the garrison.